He kicked, he screamed, and he bit every nanny in Beverly Hills. But when a poor cleaner in a blue uniform picked him up, the billionaire's baby stopped crying and kissed her. That single kiss didn't just calm the child. It exposed a truth powerful enough to shatter an entire family. They said the Hale mansion was cursed, not with ghosts, but with silence. A silence so sharp it cut through laughter, swallowed lullabies, and turned a father's love into a whisper. Inside that glass fortress on the Beverly Hills hillsides lived Nathan Hale, one of California's youngest billionaires. His life was an endless carousel of deals, parties, and boardrooms, until tragedy had stripped him of his smile. 2 years ago, his wife, Clara, had died in a car accident on their way to charity gala. She left behind a son, Leo, just 18 months old, and a father who had forgotten how to hold him. Leo was unlike any child the staff had ever known. He kicked, screamed, and bit at anyone who came close. 15 nannies in 5 months, all fired, all terrified. Some whispered that the boy was possessed. Others said he simply hated the world for taking his mother. But on a quiet Tuesday morning, everything changed. Nathan had just returned from another investor meeting when the housekeeper burst into his office. "Sir, the new cleaning lady, she's holding him." "What?" Nathan's pen froze midair. She picked him up, and he's not crying. He's... The woman hesitated, her voice trembling. "He's smiling." Nathan rushed toward the living room. His polished shoes echoed down the marble hall until he stopped, stunned. There she was, a young woman in a navy blue uniform, holding a son as if she had known him all her life. Isabella Cortez, 28 years old, daughter of a nurse and mechanic from East Los Angeles. The new cleaner who had come in just for a last-minute shift. Little Leo's chubby hands were wrapped around her neck. His cheek rested peacefully on her shoulder. And then, to everyone's disbelief, he reached up and kissed her on the cheek. The same boy who had slapped, kicked, and bitten every nanny before her. The silence in the room was deafening. Standing nearby was Margaret Langston, Nathan's mother-in-law, elegant, cold, and dripping with diamonds. Her expression twisted in visible disgust. "That woman shouldn't be holding my grandson," Margaret snapped. "She'll contaminate him with who knows what." Isabella froze, her heartbeat drumming in her chest. The insult hit hard, but her face remained calm. She had heard worse before. "I'm sorry, ma'am," she said softly, about to place Leo in his crib. But Leo started to cry. "No," he whimpered, reaching for his shirt, his little fists trembling. Everyone froze again. Nathan's jaw tightened. He doesn't let anyone do that," he murmured. Dr. Reynolds, the family pediatrician, stepped forward. "In 20 years, I've never seen such immediate response. It's as if the child recognizes her energy." Margaret scoffed. "Energy? Don't be ridiculous. She's just a cleaner." But Dr. Reynolds' gaze lingered on Isabella. There was something in her, a calm, steady warmth that quieted the chaos around her. He couldn't explain it, but Leo could feel it. "Mr. Hale," Isabella said gently, "may I make suggestion?" Nathan looked at her, uncertain. "Let me stay with Leo for 1 hour. If he's calm, maybe. The problem isn't him or the nannies. Maybe it's the way we've all been treating him." The words hit like thunder. The room went still. Margaret's eyes flared. "How dare you?" But Nathan raised a hand. "Let her try." Margaret's lips tightened in fury, but Nathan's authority was unshakable. 1 hour, he said quietly. And so, the hour began. Isabella sat on the living room floor with Leo, a few colorful blocks spread before them. She hummed softly, an old Spanish lullaby her mother used to sing during long nights in their tiny apartment. Leo's eyes followed her every move, his small body relaxing as if the music carried him to a place he'd never been allowed to go. Peace. Margaret couldn't stand it. "Imagine what the neighbors would think," she whispered to the housekeeper. "A billionaire's grandson cuddling a cleaning lady." Isabella heard every word, but she didn't react. She had grown up knowing that people like Margaret existed, people who wore classism like perfume. When she was a child, her mother would come home from double shift at the hospital and tell her, "Mija, they'll try to make you feel small. Don't let them succeed." And today, she wouldn't. "Dad," came another voice, sharp, judgmental. Lydia, Nathan's sister-in-law, walked in, her perfect hair bouncing. "This is humiliating. You're letting a janitor play mommy?" Nathan didn't respond. His eyes were locked on Leo, who was laughing, a sound he hadn't heard since Clara's funeral. Dr. Reynolds whispered, "Mr. Hale, this is remarkable. You should consider keeping her close." For Leo's sake, Margaret crossed her arms. "Out of the question." But Nathan's voice was firm now. 1 hour, he said again, "and I'll decide." As the minutes passed, Leo's laughter filled the mansion. When the clock finally struck the hour, Nathan didn't speak. He only watched as Leo fell asleep in Isabella's arms, the tension in his small body completely gone. For the first time in months, the boy looked peaceful. "Mr. Hale," Isabella said softly. "I think your son doesn't need another nanny. He needs someone who listens." Nathan's throat tightened. He had spent millions trying to fix what was broken. But this woman, with her quiet voice and callous hands, had done more in 1 hour than all the experts combined. Margaret looked horrified. "Are you suggesting?" "Yes," Isabella said simply. "Let me care for him. 1 week. If he doesn't improve, I'll leave." Margaret paled, realizing she was losing control. "Nathan, you can't." But Nathan looked at his son, and then back at Isabella. 1 week, he said finally, "but you'll have to endure my mother-in-law's presence." Isabella smiled softly. "I've endured worse, sir." That night, as she left the mansion, the housekeeper stopped her at the door. "You shouldn't come back," she whispered. "They'll make your life hell." Isabella looked at the moonlit sky above Beverly Hills, her reflection caught in the mansion's glass walls. "Maybe," she said quietly, "but some children are worth walking through hell for." And with that, she stepped into the darkness, unaware that her quiet strength had just begun to shake the foundations of one of California's most powerful families. For the first 2 days, the mansion was a battlefield of silence, the staff whispering in corners, afraid to meet Isabella's eyes. Every time she entered a room, conversation stopped mid-sentence. It was as if her presence had cracked the invisible wall that separated them from us. Margaret Langston, Nathan's formidable mother-in-law, ensured that every second of Isabella's trial week was miserable. She gave contradictory instructions, forgot to inform her about the baby's schedule, and scolded her for the smallest things. A misplaced toy, a spilled drop of milk, a lullaby sung too softly. Lydia, Nathan's sister-in-law, was worse. She followed Isabella around with her phone camera, documenting every move. "You know," she said one morning, "some people pretend to be caring just to get close to wealthy men. You wouldn't be one of those, would you?" Isabella didn't flinch. "I'm just here for Leo," she said. But Leo was thriving. He no longer cried through the night. He ate with curiosity instead of fear, and he laughed. A bright, unfiltered laugh that echoed to the marble halls like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Nathan noticed. Every time he came home late from meetings, he found Isabella on the living room floor, building towers of wooden blocks, while Leo squealed with joy. There was something magnetic about her, not beauty in the traditional sense, but warmth, patience, and the quiet confidence of someone who had fought many battles and survived. That evening, after dinner, Nathan stopped by the playroom. "You've done something impossible," he said quietly. Isabella looked up. "I just listened." He smiled faintly. "You make it sound simple." "It is," she replied. "Children feel what we try to hide. They can tell when love is real." Her words lingered in his mind long after she left the room. But not everyone was impressed. On the third morning, Margaret entered the kitchen, holding a medical report. "I spoke with Dr. Reynolds," she said icily. "He thinks Leo might be suffering from attachment confusion. It's common when children bond with inappropriate caregivers." "Inappropriate?" Isabella repeated softly. Margaret's lips curled. "You come from East LA, correct? Do you even understand the psychological complexity of a billionaire's child?" Before Isabella could answer, Nathan walked in, catching the tension in the air. "Mother, that's enough." Margaret turned, feigning innocence. "I'm only concerned for Leo." "I've seen concern," Nathan said coldly. "Yours looks a lot like control." For the first time, Margaret was silent. Nathan's voice carried an authority she hadn't heard in years. After she left, Nathan turned to Isabella. "I'm sorry. My family, they mean well, but..." "They mean what they've been taught to believe," Isabella said gently. "That money makes you worth more. My mother used to say, people see your reflection before they see your heart." Nathan looked at her for a long moment. "Your mother sounds wise." "She was," Isabella said softly. "She worked nights at a hospital to send me to college. When she got sick, I took every job I could, even cleaning, to pay for her medicine." Nathan's gaze softened. "You studied childcare, didn't you?" "Yes," she admitted. "But it's hard to find opportunities when your resume starts with a broom." Nathan didn't respond, but something shifted in his eyes, a glimmer of guilt mixed with admiration. That afternoon, Lydia made her move. While Isabella prepared Leo's lunch, Lydia accidentally spilled juice on the floor near the baby's chair. When Isabella turned to clean it, Lydia snapped a photo, catching Leo mid-cry. Minutes later, Margaret was in Nathan's study, showing him the image. "She made him cry," Margaret said, her voice trembling with fake concern. "You need to let her go before something happens." Nathan frowned. "Leo cries. He's a child." Margaret persisted. "She's manipulating him. Look how attached he's become. What if she's using that?" But Nathan had already seen the truth. That morning, he had watched from the balcony as Isabella taught Leo how to stack toy cups, clapping every time he succeeded. The look on his son's face, pure joy, was something no photo could erase. "No," Nathan said firmly, "She stays." Margaret stormed out, seething. "You'll regret this, Nathan." That night, Isabella sat on the patio after putting Leo to bed. The California air was cool, the city lights glowing like stars beneath the hills. She held her mother's silver locket, the only thing she had left of her. She whispered, "Mama, I hope I'm doing the right thing." "Rough day?" Nathan's voice startled her. He stood in the doorway, hands in his pockets. She smiled faintly, just thinking. He sat beside her, keeping a respectful distance. "You're the first person who's made this house feel alive again," he said. Isabella looked at him. Maybe it just needed laughter. Nathan nodded slowly. "You know, when Clara died, I thought Leo hated me. Every time I tried to hold him, he screamed. I started believing maybe he could sense what I'd lost." Isabella's eyes softened. "He doesn't hate you, Mr. Hale. He misses the warmth that left with her. He's just waiting for someone to bring it back." For a long moment, neither spoke. The night was filled with the soft hum of crickets and the distant sound of cars winding down the hills. Nathan finally said, "Call me Nathan." She hesitated, then nodded. "All right, Nathan." From the upstairs balcony, unseen, Margaret watched him through the window, her face a mass of fury. "This ends tomorrow," she whispered to herself. The next morning, Isabella found an envelope on the kitchen counter. It bore the Hale family crest. Inside was a note. "You have until tonight to leave quietly. Otherwise, we'll make sure no one in California hires you again." She stared at the letter, her hands trembling. For a brief moment, fear flickered through her. The fear of losing not just a job, but the first place where she felt needed in years. Then she looked toward the nursery, where Leo was sitting up in his crib, smiling as soon as he saw her. And in that instant, fear turned into resolve. She tore the letter in half. That evening, when Nathan returned home, he found Isabella reading a children's book to Leo by the fireplace. Her voice was calm, melodic, the same lullaby tone that had first made the baby fall asleep in her arms. When she finished the story, she looked up at Nathan. "Your mother threatened me," she said plainly. Nathan froze. "What?" She said she'd ruin my chances of ever working again. His fists clenched. "She did what?" Isabella shook her head gently. "Don't fight her, Nathan. She's afraid of losing control, not love. People like her confuse the two." Nathan exhaled slowly, his anger turning into quiet admiration. "You don't just calm my son," he said. "You calm everyone around you." She smiled faintly. "That's because I've lived through storms. You learn to make peace your shelter." That night, Nathan called a family meeting. Margaret and Lydia arrived, expecting to see Isabella dismissed. Instead, Nathan made an announcement that stunned everyone. Starting tomorrow, he said, Isabella Cortez will be Leo's full-time caregiver. Officially. Margaret's jaw dropped. "You can't be serious." Nathan's gaze was steady. "I've never been more serious. She's the first person who's helped my son heal." Margaret's face darkened. "If you do this, you'll regret it." Nathan looked at Isabella, then at his sleeping son. "The only thing I regret," he said softly, "is not seeing the truth sooner." As Margaret stormed out, Isabella stood quietly, her hands folded. She had won one battle, but she knew the war was far from over. In the reflection of the mansion's glass wall, she caught her own face, tired, hopeful, and unbroken. Tomorrow, she thought, they'll come for me again. 3 weeks had passed since Isabella became Leo's full-time caregiver, and the Hale mansion had transformed. The laughter of a child now echoed where there had once been only footsteps and whispers. The staff had softened too, the cold precision of their movements replaced with quiet smiles whenever they passed the nursery. But not everyone celebrated the change. From her upstairs suite, Margaret Langston watched everything like a hawk. Her plan had failed, but her anger had not cooled. In her mind, Isabella was not a miracle. She was a threat. Margaret's pride could not accept that a woman from East L.A., a cleaner, had succeeded where trained professionals had failed. And worse, Nathan seemed to be warming to her. "Mother," Lydia said one afternoon, her manicured fingers drumming against the dining table, "the staff is beginning to take her side. Even the chef calls her Miss Bella." Margaret's lips tightened. "Then it's time we remind everyone who truly runs this house." They didn't know Isabella was standing in the hallway just beyond the door, holding Leo's toy elephant in her hand. She heard every word. She had seen this kind of hatred before, subtle, quiet, wrapped in politeness and perfume, the kind that didn't scream, but whispered in expensive rooms and ruined lives. But this time, she wasn't going to be silent. That evening, after putting Leo to sleep, Isabella pulled out her small notebook. Over the past few weeks, she had begun keeping notes about conversations, dates, and things she overheard between Margaret and Lydia. It wasn't curiosity. It was caution. One note stood out. Dr. R. mentioned new protocol for Leo, but not discussed with Nathan. Another read. Lydia mentioned lawyer from Santa Monica. Something about trust fund adjustments. Her instincts told her something darker was happening beneath the family's glittering surface. The next morning, when Nathan left the office, Isabella asked Dr. Reynolds, the family pediatrician, to stop by. Doctor, she began softly, Margaret mentioned that you suggested special protocols for Leo. Did you? Dr. Reynolds frowned. No, of course not. I only recommended consistent care, which you've been providing perfectly. Then why are they using your name to push this idea? He hesitated. I'm not sure, but I can tell you this. I received a call last week from someone claiming to be Nathan's legal advisor, asking if Leo's attachment to you could be seen as psychologically unhealthy. Isabella froze. They're trying to build a case against me. Dr. Reynolds' eyes narrowed. Or against Nathan. If they can prove he's making irresponsible decisions, they could question his custody rights. A chill ran through Isabella. Margaret and Lydia weren't just trying to get rid of her. They were preparing to take Leo away from his father. Later that night, she called an old friend, Professor Daniel Cruz, a family psychologist she had studied under in college. He was one of the few people who had ever believed in her potential. Daniel, she said, her voice low, I need help. A family I work for, they're trying to frame me, maybe even destroy the father's custody rights. He didn't hesitate. Send me everything you have. I'll look into it. But, Bella, be careful. Families like that don't fight fair. I know, she whispered, but they picked the wrong woman to underestimate. The next afternoon, Margaret decided to make her move. She invited Dr. Harold Benton, a psychologist known for working with wealthy families, to assess Leo. When Isabella walked into the nursery, she found Dr. Benton observing Leo through the glass wall. Margaret and Lydia stood beside him, whispering. Good afternoon, Isabella greeted politely. Margaret's smile was ice cold. Dr. Benton is here to ensure Leo's emotional health isn't being compromised by unconventional influences. In other words, Isabella replied evenly, you want him to tell you something you already believe. Lydia's eyes flashed. Watch your tone, cleaner. Dr. Benton cleared his throat. Please, let's remain civil. I'm only here to observe. Then observe, Isabella said, kneeling by Leo's play mat. The little boy immediately giggled and crawled into her lap, resting his head on her shoulder. Dr. Benton blinked. He's unusually calm with her. That's manipulation, Margaret snapped. She's trained him to behave this way. Isabella looked up. If love is manipulation, then I'm guilty. The words hung in the air like a challenge. By the end of the session, even Dr. Benton seemed uneasy. I see no sign of distress in the child, he said finally. In fact, he appears emotionally secure for his age. Margaret paled. That's impossible. Not impossible, Isabella said quietly. Just inconvenient for you. When Nathan returned home that evening, Margaret was waiting. She's undermining this family, she began, waving Dr. Benton's report. You're blind, Nathan. She's controlling you and that child. Nathan took the paper, scanned it, and then looked up. This report says Leo is doing better than ever. Because she paid him. Lydia blurted. Isabella, standing at the doorway, said softly, Dr. Benton doesn't accept money from me, Lydia, but maybe you should tell Nathan about your visits to Santa Monica last month, the lawyer's office. Lydia froze. What? How do you? Nathan's eyes darkened. What lawyer? Margaret quickly interjected. That's none of your concern. No, Isabella said firmly, stepping forward. It's very much his concern, because while he was rebuilding his life, you were plotting to steal custody of his son and take control of the family trust. Nathan turned pale. Is that true? Margaret's mask cracked. You don't understand. We were trying to protect the family fortune. From me? Nathan demanded. From your weakness, she snapped. You let that woman into our home. You've embarrassed us in front of everyone we know. Isabella took a deep breath. You can insult me all you want, but don't pretend this is about protection. It's about power. For a moment, the room was silent. Then Nathan's voice came, low and controlled. Get out, mother. Margaret stared at him, stunned. You can't mean... I said leave. And don't come near my son again until you remember what love looks like. Lydia tried to protest, but Nathan's tone left no room for argument. They both left in silence, their heels clicking across the marble floor. When the door closed, Nathan leaned against the wall, exhausted. How did you know? He asked softly. Isabella hesitated. Because I've seen that look before. People who mistake control for care. My own aunt tried to take my sister's baby once, claiming she could raise her better. He looked at her, his expression filled with gratitude and awe. You saved my family, Isabella. She shook her head. No, I just reminded you what family really means. At that moment, her phone buzzed. A message from Professor Cruz. Found evidence of financial manipulation in the Hale Trust. I'm sending it to you tonight. Be ready. She looked at Nathan. This isn't over. They won't go down quietly. Nathan's jaw tightened. Then we'll face them together. Outside, a storm rolled across the California hills, lightning flashing against the city skyline. Inside the Hale mansion, another storm was brewing, one that would soon expose a final, devastating truth. Morning sunlight spilled through the glass walls of the Hale mansion, but it couldn't warm the air. The entire house seemed to hold its breath. The night before, Professor Daniel Cruz had sent Isabella everything. Files, bank records, even recorded calls between Margaret and Lydia's lawyers. The truth was explosive. Margaret Langston had been secretly transferring funds from the Hale family trust into an offshore account, while Lydia had used Leo's name as collateral to secure massive personal loans. Their plan was simple: paint Nathan as an unfit father, claim custody of Leo, and seize control of the fortune under the guise of protecting the child. They hadn't just wanted power, they wanted ownership. Isabella spent most of the night pacing in the nursery, watching little Leo sleep peacefully, his small breaths, his tiny hand clutching the edge of his blanket. This was what she was fighting for. Not money, not pride, just a child's right to grow up in love, not fear. When Nathan came downstairs that morning, his eyes were shadowed but steady. Daniel confirmed everything. He said quietly, "They've been planning this for months." Isabella nodded. "They'll deny it. You need proof in front of witnesses." Nathan frowned. "What do you suggest?" "We call a meeting," she said. "Make them feel safe. And then let the truth speak for itself." By noon, the plan was set. Margaret and Lydia arrived at the mansion, smiling as if nothing had happened. They believed Nathan had come to apologize, to restore the family harmony. "Nathan, darling," Margaret began, her pearls gleaming against the pale skin, "I knew you'd come to your senses." But the room they entered wasn't a dining hall. It was Nathan's study. Inside waited not just Nathan and Isabella, but Dr. Reynolds, Professor Cruz, and Nathan's corporate lawyer. Margaret hesitated. "What's this?" Nathan's tone was calm but cold. "A family meeting. And an end to your lies." He pressed a button on the desk. The projector screen behind him lit up, displaying a series of emails, bank statements, and voice recordings. Margaret's face drained of color as her own voice filled the room. "Make sure the doctor declares her unfit. We'll use that to take the boy." Then Lydia's voice. "If Nathan looks unstable, Mom gets the trust. We can move the funds before the audit." Silence. Then chaos. Margaret's eyes went wide. "Where did you get this?" "From the people you tried to destroy," Isabella said evenly. Dr. Reynolds folded his arms. "You tried to use me to validate a lie. You put that child's mental health at risk." Lydia trembled. "This isn't what it looks like." Professor Cruz stepped forward. "It's exactly what it looks like. Fraud, manipulation, and attempted custody interference. All documented." Nathan stood, his voice steady. "You tried to take my son, my company, and my peace. But what hurts most," he glanced toward Isabella, "is that you try to destroy the only person who ever helped us heal." Margaret's facade cracked. "Nathan, please. I did it for you." "No," he interrupted. "You did it for control. And now it's over." The lawyer handed her a folder. "These are formal notices. You're removed from all trust management and financial decision-making, effective immediately. The evidence will also be turned over to authorities." Margaret's hands shook as she read the papers. "You can't do this to me. I'm family." Nathan's gaze hardened. "Family protects. You tried to possess." Lydia burst into tears, pleading, "Nathan, please." But Nathan simply turned to Isabella. "Take Leo upstairs." As she carried the boy out of the room, she could still hear Margaret's angry sobs echoing down the marble hall. By the following week, the story was everywhere. The Los Angeles Chronicle ran headlines. "Hale family scandal exposes power, greed, and the courage of a caregiver." Nathan refused to give interviews, but Isabella's calm honesty during a brief press statement won hearts across California. "I didn't expose them for revenge," she told the cameras. "I did it because a child deserves peace. And because truth, no matter how dangerous, always brings healing." Within days, donations flooded in from families and organizations. Isabella and Professor Cruz launched a nonprofit called the Clara Foundation, named after Nathan's late wife. Its mission, to support single parents and caregivers facing discrimination. Nathan officially hired Isabella as Leo's educational director, a position that combined her background in child development with a generous salary and full independence. But more than that, he gave her something far greater: trust. And over time, something beautiful began to grow between them. It wasn't romance born from pity or proximity. It was something gentler, deeper, built on gratitude, respect, and shared wounds. Nathan often joined her in the evenings to read to Leo. Sometimes, when the little boy fell asleep, they'd sit together on the patio, watching the lights of Los Angeles shimmer like gold dust below them. "I used to think power meant control," Nathan said one night. Now I know it means responsibility. Isabella smiled. And responsibility means love. He looked at her for a long time. You've changed everything, Isabella. For him. For me. She shook her head softly. Leo changed me too. He reminded me that broken hearts can still recognize kindness. From that night on, they didn't need words. 6 months later, the Hale mansion was unrecognizable. Not in its grandeur, but in its warmth. Leo, now 2.5, ran through the hallways, giggling. His laughter was no longer rare. It was the soundtrack of the home. Dr. Reynolds often said, "That boy is living proof that love is the best medicine." Isabella's foundation had grown rapidly, helping hundreds of women like her find education and fair work. Her story became a beacon of hope, proof that dignity can defeat prejudice, and that compassion is stronger than privilege. As for Margaret and Lydia, their downfall was quiet but complete. Margaret was forced to step down from every board she once ruled. Lydia, buried in debt and public disgrace, moved away, leaving behind a world that had once worshipped her name. One evening, while watching Leo play with building blocks, Isabella felt a tug on her sleeve. "Bella," he said, pointing to the tallest tower he had built. "Look, I made it." She smiled, kneeling beside him. "You did, my love. You made something beautiful." Nathan, standing nearby, said softly, "Just like you did." Isabella turned, her eyes shimmering. "No," she whispered. "We made it together." The sunset poured through the windows, painting the marble floor in gold and orange. The same marble that had once echoed with bitterness now gleamed with peace. For the first time in a long time, the Hale mansion was no longer cursed with silence. It sang, with laughter, redemption, and the quiet rhythm of a child's heartbeat. Isabella looked out over California hills and thought of her mother's words. "They'll try to make you feel small. Don't let them succeed." And she hadn't, because in a world obsessed with status, one woman with courage and love had rewritten what power truly meant. The billionaire's baby who had once fought every nanny had found his peace. Not in wealth, not in privilege, but in the arms of a woman the world had overlooked. And in her embrace, he found what his family had lost long ago: home,